Madhuvatharitayate madhuksharanti sindhavaha madhvi irna santoshadhi madhunakta mutoshasi madhumatparthiva gunrajaha madhudyorastu nafpita madhumano vanaspatir madhubagum astu suryaha Madhvirgavo bhavantu naha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the winds bring us happiness. May the rivers carry happiness to us. May the herbs give us happiness. May night and day yield us happiness. May the dust of the earth bring us happiness. May the heavens give us happiness. May the sun pour down happiness. May the cows yield us happiness. Om, peace, peace, peace. Oh Lord, thank you for making me so outstandingly talented, and please forgive me if I am exceedingly successful in life. May I be more humble. May I not behold my grandiosity when I compare myself to others. And please help me get rid of my ego. Thank you, Lord. The biggest ego trip is getting rid of your ego. And of course, the joke of it all is that your ego does not exist. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ramakrishna Monastery. What a joy to see all your faces after, 2 or 3 months, God? We have started this new season, 2022. 2023, my gosh, it's coming. So fast, huh? Seriously, thank you for being here today. And a special thanks for all those who were here yesterday, who could make it for the Karma Yoga. They helped us prepare the hall, and it's been great. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Was anything wrong with the prayer? Really? Was I boasting? A little bit, don't you think? Excessive pride, maybe? Excessively proud and self-satisfied talk? Is there anything wrong with being talented? I want yes and no, please. No. Is there anything wrong about being too proud and self-satisfied? We all feel something like, Is there anything wrong with being successful? No. Is there anything wrong in comparing yourself with others? Not cool. That doesn't sound right. You need to find your own motivation centered in yourself and not in others. one thing we all agree, that this guy definitely needs divine help to work with his ego. And of course, there is nothing wrong in being grateful. To be grateful opens your heart, creates emotional benefits, helps you develop a positive feeling. Gratitude helps you being less self-centered. Gratitude helps you being less self-centered. It opens the door for unselfishness. Gratitude is just the right attitude. A necessary evil. You know what they say about taxes, right? What is a necessary evil? Something that is undesirable but must be accepted. Something unpleasant that must be accepted in order to achieve a particular result. An evil that is required for some other end, evil necessity, regrettable necessity, unfortunate necessity. With this definition, I can now introduce the topic for today's lecture. A necessary ego. Sri Ramakrishna talks about two types of egos, but boy, it's so difficult to navigate these two. It gets so confusing. By the way, did you know that the word ego in what we call the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is mentioned more than 350 times? There must be something about that word that is so important for our spiritual development. He talks about the unripe ego, or the wicked ego, the ignorant ego, as opposed to the ripe ego. But he says he could be expressed as a child ego, servant ego, or the ego of knowledge. You know him, he was into these bhavas, states of mind, and he was always talking like that. Oh, I feel like I'm a child, or mother's child. What did he mean, really? Why is it so complicated for us? The ego that makes a man feel that he is a devotee of God or a son of God is a servant, or a servant of God is good. But the ego that makes a man attached to lust and greed is the unripe ego. And Ramakrishna says that ego is to be renounced. What does he mean? More the knowledge, lesser the ego. Lesser the knowledge, more the ego. Who said that? Albert Einstein. And boy, he had a lot to be egotistic about. Let's try to analyze the ego idea. There are three dimensions in the meaning of the word ego. Empirical, that means by means of observation or experience, rather than theory or pure logic. Ethical, and spiritual. Empirical, ethical, and spiritual. These are the three dimensions of the word ego. Empirically, ego is that sense of I which precedes all our perceptions and experiences. You follow? We all have it. Empirically, ego is that sense of I which precedes all our perception and experiences. I see, I hear. It gives a sense of belongingness to all kinds of experiences that come within the realm of our consciousness. Ethically, it is symbolic of selfishness. That's a bad connotation there. Ethically, it is symbolic of selfishness, which is a negative quality in ethics. Though, in a normal sense, ego is not unethical, more often it leads one to disregard others' interests in favor of one's own interests, and propels one to act unethically. True? Yeah. Spiritually, this sense of I, the ego from the spiritual point of view, when it is limited and identified with the body, senses, mind, intellect, is a kind of wrong identification of the inner self, the indweller of this body. This is the root cause of various types of delusions that makes one's life so agonizing. That which always follows the sense of I-ness is the sense of mine. That sense of mine which leads to attachment to people and objects, towards whom we develop an unrealistic sense of possessiveness and ownership. As we dive deep into our spiritual life, happens to all of us, we are all present here, we understand that a spiritual life is all about, apparently, the annihilation of our ego. And we try to tame it. We try to reduce our ego to the most minute size possible. And what do we find? Life is complicated. And it gets more complicated when we try to do this. It gets so confusing. These seemingly aspects of the ego, they all get mixed up. Does it happen to you? Oh, my ego, no, I should be more humble. I shouldn't show off. I shouldn't say that. And there is this you get tired of it, don't you? You're like, oh my gosh, what is all this business? But in reality, it is what it is. It gets mixed up. And for those who are in this spiritual world, who really wants to commit to, being the master of ourselves, it does get complicated because we have a life, especially you guys. I, as a monk, I'm a little more protected. I live here. But you are busy. You have to interact with others. And it gets complicated. When it comes to the rules of this divine play, we have to be open and flexible enough to understand that, first of all, as long as we live in a human body, there will be traces of ego. Do you hear that? So, the annihilation of the ego idea, in reality, is more like a tool in your hands to be used intelligibly to grow and manifest more spiritually. I know in the past I have talked about this subject, the ego. I have addressed this ego topic as a problem. And also I wanted you to make sure that you were aware of your shadow. You can find these lectures online. But this time, I want to be more realistic. I mean, not that I wasn't realistic, but this is what happens to us. Let's just try to see the positive side or aspect of this ego. Because we can help it. Yes, ego is inevitable. As I said, as long as we live in these human bodies, there will be traces of ego. But we have to remember that the goal is to become a perfect personality, a perfect character. The goal is to grow in character and to strengthen our spiritual personality. Swami Vivekananda says, you people in this country are so afraid of losing your individuality, he said in one of his talks with friends. You people in this country are so afraid of losing your individuality. Why? You are not individuals yet. When you realize your whole nature, you will attain your true individuality and not before. I always like this quote. When you realize your whole nature, you will attain your true individuality and not before. What does it mean? If we do not accept our true individuality, this journey is just difficult. It is very, very painful. Instead of centering our individuality in the whole, as the scriptures say, at least trying to understand that my I consciousness is your I consciousness, and therefore I should feel for you. Life is very painful. But it's also not easy to practice this. Let us define ego for the sake of our study. Let us go deeper into the definition of ego. I am is the reality. I am this, and I am that is ego. I am, simple, is the reality. I am this or that is ego. The jiva is called, with J, embodied being expressing itself as I is called ego or Ahamkara in Sanskrit. Jiva, the embodied being, is that which identifies its existence with that of life in the physical body. Simple, it happens to all of us. The ego can be taken as that part of the mind which expresses individuality. Me and mine. We saw this. We talked about this in the past. It is the ego that gives us the sense of I and mine. Ahamkara is a Sanskrit word that indicates the sense of concept, of one's own individuality, the individualized I sense expressed as I do, I own, I enjoy. etc. Ego is that which owns something. Owns. I own my house, I own my car, I own my body. Ego is that which owns something. For example, when I see, I say, this is my sight. I see it now. The one who owns the activity of seeing, the one who is the subject behind the seeing or behind the hearing, tasting, smelling, thinking, or doing anything, is what is meant by the doer. In Sanskrit, it's called karta, the ego, the famous Ahamkara. That imaginary doer behind thought and action, that imaginary doer behind thought and action, this set of entrenched habits of thought enforced by societal consensus and unconscious repetition creates the illusory sense of a personal self. The ego is the center of our personality, which is a very complex thing. It is not easy to understand how deep its roots are. Every moment of our lives, we are keenly conscious of ourselves as individuals. When we think or speak or do anything, we know that the ego, our sense, the I sense, is present. When I say I, what am I referring to? I includes my likes and dislikes, and this is very important. My gender, my nationality, my aspirations and frustrations, my profession. The ego, which is associated with an assortment of identities, cannot stay satisfied for too long. It is restless. It is restless because it does not feel enough. It must do something. It must be something. You ready for a story? Yeah. Once upon a time, there was a highly skilled sculptor. He went to his astrologer, as it is a custom in India, and why not everywhere, and was told that he would die in 6 months' time. As most people, he wanted to avoid death at all costs. So he hit upon an idea. He decided to make 10 identical statues of himself, which were ready in record time. The sculptor thought his creation would save him. He could hide himself. He could hide himself from Yama, the god of death. And Yama would never be able to find him. The 6 months came to an end. At the appointment time, Lord Yama, the Lord of Death, sent his duttas or messengers to get this sculpture. Being trained as efficient assistants, the Yamadutas came to the sculptor's studio but could not identify him. They went back to Yama empty-handed. Lord Yama, who had seen all types of tricks that human beings have used since time immemorial to avoid death, decided to come down himself. Yama was now in the sculptor's studio. As he inspected the 10 sculpted forms, he exclaimed, "Such perfection! Are they man-made or Deva? Deva means God. Or Deva-made?" He stood in the center of a studio and said, "What a creation. I know no human can create this. I'm sure it has been made by a Devata. I wonder which Devata could have made such perfection," he said out loud. "It is impossible," he declared. "No human being could have ever made this." The sculptor could not hold himself any longer. He was so excited. His heart was racing. He couldn't control his tongue. Impelled by the inner pressure, he blurted, "No, sir, I have made these masterpieces." It was no Devata. It was me. I met them all, and I agree. I truly think these are my best work. Needless to say, that was all that Yama needed. "Good. Come with me now." Ego is usually connected with the wrong attitude of conducting oneself. That bad aspect of ourselves that manifests consciously or unconsciously, as in the case when we say, "Oh, he can't see it. He's not aware of it." He just can't help it. He can't help his ego. You know, when one shows narcissistic egotism, vanity, and when one shows pride, sometimes we can't help it. In a spiritual parlance, ego implies a negative quality, an obstacle to what we call the realization because of its linear dualistic construction. In psychology, however, very interesting, the term denotes coping and survival skills needed to deal effectively with the world. And we cannot actually deny this fact, can we? Because we need it. So why are we calling ego evil? Well, an unchecked ego is the culprit for all evil. Unchecked. Spiritual progress is quickened by understanding the true nature of our ego. Understanding. Ego is not an enemy to be attacked or defeated, nor is it an evil to be vanquished. Ego is weakened by what? Compassionate understanding. And eventually destroyed by self-inquiry. Did you follow me? How do you deal with your ego then? By compassionate understanding. We have to be very loving. Very understanding. And eventually can be destroyed by self-inquiry. We'll talk about that later. But unless we understand, there will always be that fear and that doubt that we all have when it comes to dealing with our ego. Oh, I shouldn't say this or shouldn't show because what will people think? Let's dive into compassionate understanding. You ready? Ahamkara in Sanskrit indicates the sense of concept of one's own individuality, the individualized I sense, as I mentioned. The word ahamkara means the absence. The word an-ahamkara. On one hand, we have ahamkara, the sense of individuality, and on the other hand, there is another word, which is an-ahamkara, a prefix, comes with a prefix, which means the absence of the sense of ahamkara, freedom from this individualized self. Total distraction, total annihilation of ahamkara is self-knowledge, which is the primary meaning of an ahamkara, self-knowledge. Is it clear? Now, self, capital self, that is a high standard. And if we get there, we are not here anymore. We are everywhere. Are you here? Cool. You could be everywhere too. The word anahamkara also carries a secondary meaning in which it is a preparatory means for knowledge. It is expressed or known as a preparatory means for knowledge. Means for knowledge. Anahamkara. Let us try to analyze a little bit this concept, this Sri Ramakrishna's concept of the ripe ego. What do we mean by a relative absence of our ego as a preparatory means for knowledge? A relative absence of our ego. How can you bring about a relative absence of ego? By understanding what causes the presence of our ego. Are you ready for some gymnastics? Are you warmed up already? I need you. Presence of ego is the result of ignorance. Period. Ego gains its status because we never think of examining its reality. We are never willing to think, to stop, to analyze its reality. The aggrandizement of ego comes about purely due to lack of thinking on our part. Lack of thinking. Which is sometimes very embarrassing because when we show ego or, pride, etc., and then we are like, well, I should have thought about it. Or contemplate a little bit before doing that. Why? Because of what is coming. When I clearly, objectively examine the claims made by my ego, when I clearly, objectively examine the claims made by the ego, it cannot but lose its strength. Ahamkara, ego, and manitva in Sanskrit, that word means pride, are closely related. Ego and pride are closely related, almost synonymous effects, born of the same cause. Ignorance of the relationship of the individualized sense of I, individualized sense of the I with the world. Ignorance of that relationship. Although we are all graced by free will, we have the power to choose our actions. We do. You came here. You decided to be here. But we have no power over the actual results of our actions. The result I anticipate can never be more than a probability among possibilities. In any field of our lives, the results of our actions that we anticipate can never be more than a probability among possibilities. You see it? It would get clearer. I do not produce the result. The results of any act of mine occurs both as the product of materials that I have not authored, as well as the outcome of many circumstances, past and present, known and unknown, which must operate in perfect harmony for the given result to occur. There is a word in Sanskrit, it's called dosha, which means limitations. The limitations that are related to our life experience. Pain, troubles, obstacles, limitations. What are they? The pains and troubles coming from within, they are called adhyatmika dukkha. Internal pain comprises the aches and pains and troubles of my individualized person. Could be emotional, state of mind. Adhyatmika dukkha, internal pain. Pain and troubles coming from within. Second, pain and troubles coming from the outside. Adibhautika. External pain is made up of the problems of the world around me. The smoke in the air, my neighbors playing the stereo sometimes, the AC in my room sometimes is not working. It's painful, especially the past few days. And pains and troubles, I loved how this put in Sanskrit, from the heavenly source. Adidevika. It is the painful result of an event over which there is no control whatsoever. And this is stuff that we don't think about it. I mean, we know they are there. We acknowledge that, I'm not feeling well today. I'm not in the mood. Or, hey, this is not working. I can't go anywhere, my car, And this so-called heavenly source, painful results of an event over which there is no control whatsoever. A tsunami, an earthquake, or an erupting volcano, or hurricane. Can come right now, and what will you do? If my strong, skillful arm is able to mold the clay in such a way that can resemble perfectly to a human figure, the material and circumstantial factors that come together to produce this masterpiece are too many for the final result to be a matter of personal pride. You follow me? I am neither the creator of the clay itself, nor of my healthy body. Many things contributed to the development of the skill, I am not responsible for any external circumstance that could have happened and could not have allowed me to finish the work on time. Do we always think about these things? Rarely. Pride and ego, when examined, become so silly that we need to understand the virtue of humility. Humility is simply understanding the world, including myself, because I am part of that world, just as it is. When I understand things as they are, I will be neither proud nor will I be self-condemning. Self-condemnation also is an expression of the ego present only as a thought pattern. In the correct understanding of myself, of my relationship with the world, there is no room for neither pride nor self-condemnation. Then, how do we navigate our ego? We are clearly in charge of our lives to an extent. But if we think we are totally in charge, do you think we are totally in charge? We are absolutely mistaken. Do you follow me? Everything is given to us, whether we want to acknowledge or not. Even the ego that thinks it is in charge. Tameva sharanam gaccha sarvabhavena bharata tat prasadat param shantim stanam prapsyasi shashwavatam. This is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, verse 62, chapter 18. Take refuge in Him alone. And I know you will say, oh, Swami, again, you have to take refuge in the Lord, and that will be all, really. You will close the lecture right there. Take refuge in Him alone with your whole being. That's the message coming from the Bhagavad Gita. If you ask me, the most important book that is available to us. And it's free sometimes, you can find it online. Take refuge in Him alone with your whole being, your whole heart, O Arjuna. Through His grace you will attain supreme peace and the eternal abode. Do you follow? Take refuge in Him alone with your whole being, your whole heart. You open your heart to Him, to that universe, energy, whatsoever it is, the law behind everything, because we are clearly not in charge. What is that? We don't know. Krishna calls it Him, capital. Through His grace, you will attain the supreme peace and the eternal abode. What is the message here? That we have to accept the Lord with our whole heart, because the Lord is in charge. But you want to take this period and say, okay, amen, and don't question it. Will you be satisfied if we do that? Yes, if we are devotees. We love that. I mean, I like it. Kind of like it. Because you can relate to your God and you take refuge in your God. Could be Jesus or anybody. That idea, that name and form. We use our emotional constitution and fall in love with it. But everything is given to us by the ruler of all laws in nature. And this is coming from the scriptures. By the ruler of all laws in nature. We call it Ishvara. the Lord of nature, the God, the idea of God. Clearly somebody is in charge of this. I mean, there must be somebody, something. Who is the indweller, he says. The indweller is within you, in keeping with our own karma. We are here not because we are saintly people. We did something that caused our being here in these human bodies. It's good though, we're living human bodies. We could be in some other body. At least we have this instrument. We can reason, we can think, we can apply intellect, which is extremely necessary to overcome your lower self. According to that karma, things happen. Our life happens with all the challenges and aspirations. But we cannot take charge of things for which we have no responsibility. Acknowledging our limitations, acknowledging these famous doshas, pains and troubles, coming from within me, external, and even more from the heavens, tsunamis, and have no control. It's very, very important. Did you follow that? Now, when you think about your life, your activities in life, think about this, contemplate this. Yes, I am definitely efficient, I am very talented, but hey, don't take, don't take pride of it. Because certainly for you to be very efficient, other circumstances must take place. So slowly we are leaning towards more the understanding that we are mere instruments. And you may say, well, I'm lucky. Maybe you're lucky. We don't know. Sometimes it's hard to be in somebody else's, in a lucky person. Wealth doesn't equal happiness, you know that. You have to have this state of mind to enjoy that wealth. So, acknowledging these limitations in these phenomena is very important to make us humble. Personal credit for anything is irrelevant and cannot be substantiated. We should be able to enjoy the world as a field for the discovery of the true knowledge, but without pride and without egotism. Now, bear with me. Let's keep exercising. To say that one should surrender one's ego to the Lord is a very common statement. It is much too simplistic in terms of understanding what is meant by surrender. What is meant by surrender? Are you ready to analyze this? First of all, I do not know who or what the Lord is. I am humble enough to tell you, I do not know what the Lord or who the Lord is. Do you? Are you? Do you know? Who do we call it? God? Yes. He must be somewhere. He's everywhere. And why should I surrender the only ego I have, my individuality, to this Lord? As it is, I have only a few things, and these things are owned by this ego. If I surrender it to the Lord, what will I get in return? Well, the scripture says, they say you will get everything. Everything. All right. The question that would arise would be if the ego is already surrendered. Who will get everything? What is the I to enjoy? Right? Once I have surrendered my ego, I have become totally demaciated. Then who is there to get anything out of that surrender? Nobody. Therefore, wouldn't you say that this type of surrender is useless? Also, the next question is, who is surrendering the ego? Somebody has to do the surrendering. It is the ego that has to surrender itself. And that is not possible. Again, if I am wearing a jacket, I can surrender the jacket. I can hang it somewhere or put it in somebody's shoulder. Also, when I am the owner of the jacket, it is easy to surrender it. If I am not the owner of the jacket, I can ask you to take it, but I cannot surrender it because it does not belong to me, clearly. Similarly, we are told that the Ahamkara, the ego, belongs to the Lord, and that we must surrender it. How can I surrender what does not belong to me? I can only surrender what belongs to me. If it belongs to the Lord, who is it that I do know? Who is it that I do know this? If it belongs to the Lord, who is it that knows this? In fact, I think that everything belongs to me, including the Lord. Why else would I address him as my Lord? If there is a Lord, and this Lord includes everything, then I have nothing to surrender. What do you think? Pretty good. Logic. Are you getting happy now? Are you happier? You have nothing to surrender. Great. If there is a Lord, and this Lord includes everything, then I have nothing to surrender. I have only to know. Furthermore, if I have to surrender to the Lord, who is separate from me, then I am the ego. Who then is to surrender this ego? The ego alone has to surrender. How can the ego surrender? The one who surrenders is the ego. And being the one who surrenders, the ego can only surrender what it owns. The owner cannot be surrendered. If the ego has to surrender to the Lord, something else, pay attention, something else must be there to surrender it. Which can only be another ego. The ego requires an ego, which requires yet another ego. Thus, we find ourselves in an infinite loop of regression. Ooh, it's getting. How then are we going to surrender our ego to the Lord? How do we do this? Because according to Vedanta, the Lord is our indwelling self. And apparently, we are already that. We are not pretty good at letting that Lord, that being manifest in our lives fully. Yes, we are all the Lord, but limited by your personalities. Expand your personality, let that Lord be, and that will be the end of it. What we call surrender, and the use of the word surrender, for you to just calm down and understand and practice it, is nothing but an attitude you embrace in your life about yourself and your relationship with the world. Nothing but an attitude. Surrender is an attitude, a mature attitude. Surrender as such is not possible for the ego because it cannot surrender itself. But with an attitude of surrender, I can weaken my ego. I can appreciate that there is nothing in this creation that is authored by me, that everything is given to me, including my physical body, mind, and senses. Do you see it? Why are we told that we have to be grateful and we have to surrender to the Lord? Because it's an attitude. We're tricking ourselves. But we get the whole benefit. What is given to me is not mine. When I say, I am just a caregiver, a trustee, O Lord, and you are the giver, the ego is what tells me all this. Thus, surrender can be only in terms of attitude. Then, how does one get rid of this lila? How do we move on? Because we are all in this lila, in this phenomenon, in this world. We are all playing different roles. Father, mother, your relationship with your cat, your dog. What is all this? It is said in the scriptures, in our scripture, that the only way to move on out of this samsara or lila play is by getting rid of your ego, the karta, the doer. In the name of getting rid of everything else, the ego remains in one form or the other because the ego cannot get rid of itself. We just can't. It cannot. It cannot be. It's a delusion. As long as we are here, guess what? We'll have to live with it. We are conscious beings. It will always be there, and behind you, in the background will say, I'm the most charitable person around. Even a person who does not talk about his or her good actions may think of himself or herself as a humble person and say, I never mention all my charities. I don't boast about them. Ask anyone, and they will tell you. It's always there, Cannot get rid of it. But you can pay attention to it. You can develop an attitude towards that ego. Because after all, it's a tool in your hands. And we'll get there. Give me another 10 more minutes. Because the ego, the doer, is always there in one form or the other, it cannot be defeated. Except by the one who undertakes inquiry about who am I? Who am I? Very Vedantic. Now that we have understood, and I hope you did, let us now dive deep into what we call self-inquiry. It's going to be a little dry. It's not Vedanta, hardcore. You like it. You love Vedanta. You demand Vedanta sometimes. Okay, so we have mentioned before that the ego could be weakened by understanding of how things work in the world, in me, within me, and outside me, and destroyed, so to say, by self-inquiry. A person can study every philosophy there is, and the ego will remain saying, I am a philosopher. Only when the question, who am I, is asked, is the ego in trouble. Why? Because the ego, the doer, is really a superimposition. There is no doership, in fact, because its existence depends on that consciousness behind. That's what we are. Awareness of our existence. You know that because you are here. You can acknowledge your existence here and now. And that's a proof of your divinity. When the truth of oneself is recognized, and this is our job, we have to recognize this. The ego does not go away, strictly speaking. Rather, this recognition is what makes one see the ego as that which is not independent of its own. The going away of the ego, then, is purely in terms of negation or distraction by knowledge. The moment you know, boom, it goes away. This recognition. The word distraction is generally used in the physical sense, such as destroying an object so that it no longer exists in that form. Here, distraction of the ego is purely in terms of negation. What is this negation, Swami? Negation by knowledge occurs when an object is there, but its reality is taken away. Be here. Its reality is taken away. For example, you can enjoy the blue sky. Isn't the sky blue? But at the same time, you know that the sky is not blue. Knowing that the sky is not really blue dismisses the blueness. Or enjoying a movie, you can clearly dismiss the reality of it. It's just a movie, right? Bunch of actors playing, and I like it. But what happened with the kid? Does the kid know that it's a movie? What do you think is our situation here? We consider this reality to be real, and we are unable to discern that is not independent. That is just like a movie. Sounded like Adele's song. And I guess that's our predicament. We are and act like kids. This knowing comes by negation, understanding an object or situation and removing the reality of it. What is true here? Similarly, the ego is not removed, but the fact that it has no independent existence is and must be understood and must be accepted. And what does the ego? What does the ego that everyone has was that the ego that everyone has, you and I, depend upon? What is it that exists independently without depending on the ego upon which everything else depends? The ego depends for its existence on the divine consciousness alone, the self. Therefore, the self is the truth of every ego behind. Your ego, my ego. It is actually simple. Just relaxing. Then, who is the doer? The self or the ego? The reflected consciousness identified with the mind is the doer. Therefore, you say, I am the doer. Doership itself is a thought centered on the I. What is to be understood here is that while thought is centered on the I itself is not centered on the thought. While the thought is centered on the I itself, the light doesn't care what I'm thinking. It's just light. It's here witnessing everything. I itself is not centered on the thought. Recognition of this fact is not the elimination or removal of thought. It is understanding the truth behind the I. The seeker should not only know the presence of the witness behind our being, within the body and mind, but also he should go a step further and proclaim that he or she, himself or herself, is that witness. And here is where we fail a little bit. We are so entangled that we forget this. This is something that should come out every day out of your spiritual practice, that should come up in your meditation. You should remember, who am I? Where am I? Can the Lord be away from you? Never. Then what's the point in being troubled? Relax. Life is good. We are just instruments in His hands. You don't have to take ownership for it. You don't have to be proud about it. This is the most important step which every seeker of the truth has to take. Merely knowing that there is this consciousness within him or her will not help. For making this claim, he needs to give up his belief, just addressing him as her belief as well, that he or she exists in this body and mind. He needs to give up. You and I, we have to give up the idea that I am the body and mind. Then we will understand what Sri Ramakrishna says. But the ego that makes a man attached to lust and greed is the unripe ego. That ego is to be renounced. The seeker should know that his real status is not his body-mind. He should also proclaim the indwelling consciousness. Is ego a necessary evil? I ask you. You have to arrive at your own conclusions by now. The presence of this consciousness and its reflection in the mind as reflected consciousness makes the I thought to arise in one's mind. I am. There is light behind. That's why you see me saying this. The I thought. It is the I. Is it the I thought required? Is it the I thought required, I ask you? Well, we should know, and by now we know, how to use that I thought. How to relate that I unto what? Is it necessary? Well, my dear friends, the I thought is called in Sanskrit Ahamkara. It is required for all of us to claim and declare Aham Brahmasmi. You have to do it. I am that Brahman. The pure I alone remains. You see it? So let's keep playing with the understanding, with inquiry, constant inquiry. Who is this I? And you have to declare, I am that light consciousness, which is everywhere, not just in me, in you. And if I am confident, I should be confident about you too. More the knowledge, lesser the ego. Do you understand now? Now that we know, we have to lower our ego. Lesser the knowledge, more the ego. Oh Lord, thank you for making me understand that I should not take personal credit for anything in my life. I am honored to be your instrument and contribute with my best possible. Allow me to be in your presence so that you can finally take over and I may finally realize that it was always you. Thank you. What do you think? Wow, silence. You don't have to applaud me, we don't need that. I'm just joking. Oh my God, I'm just joking. Any question?
Ahamkara. The word ahamkara. Vritti is basically things from the thoughts.
Yes.
And it's also reflected consciousness, which is basically the state of the mind.
Yeah.
So mind and thought. You need to have purity of the mind to do this. Can you talk a little bit about how you get that vritti, which is always...
Well, the vritti is always there. Yes. It's just how you use it. The understanding of how you navigate yourself and the whole world and how you interact, you and the world, will give you the right attitude and be able to use that ahamkara, the I am. Meaning, you can't just go about saying, yes, I am Brahman, I can do whatever I want. If you are Brahman, you have a huge responsibility. He or she is also Brahman. You see it? That is the basis of all ethics. That's what Swami Dhyanayogananda is always talking about. That is why it's so important for us to understand and accept the Vedantic principle. Who am I? What am I? Where am I? But we should also apply it in our lives. I know you may say, well, that's a high standard. Okay, fine. Enjoy your life. Enjoy the play. But be responsible. Have the right attitude. Understand how your ego works. Understand that you cannot take credit for either good or bad that happens around you. I say either good or bad because sometimes we are good at, I'm so bad. That's not good either. Neither extremes. So that's what it is. That's why I said that we should always keep in mind in our interaction with our world that we cannot take credit. We just need to be grateful. With that attitude, we open up the door of our heart that will keep us humble. And we will also be able to express that in our daily dealings with other people. So navigating this world and this life here is not easy, but slowly, with practice, with study, we can do this. It is possible. Yes?
This situation of seeing ourselves as an ego, is there a purpose to it? Is there a benefit? Why?
What's that? Say it again?
Is there a purpose or benefit to seeing yourself as an ego?
That's okay, I heard you. Yeah, well, is there any benefit? Well, you can help it, right? Who are you?
Why are we in this situation?
Why?
Why? Is this a part of a process? Is it a purpose?
Well, that's kind of like the question, right? And you are in this Vedanta kind of atmosphere, so you have to be ready to take the answer. Because we are divine beings living a human experience. As simple as that.
Is there a purpose or benefit to living the human experience?
I guess, according to what our teachers say, the purpose is to express that divinity. When you're able to express and evolve, you can say that word, use that word, to your highest, then you are fully satisfied. You are complete. You are no longer lost in this world.
Wouldn't you also be fully satisfied if you had never engaged in the exercise to begin with?
Do you think so?
I don't know.
Well, think about it. You have needs, don't you?
The ego does.
No, you have needs. You live in a human body. You need security. You need comfort. You need all that. I mean, you can live on the streets, no problem, but you will have to beg food. So since we are here, we have to create and have a purpose.
So the answer is basically just the way things are.
The way things are, we are here. Can we avoid this? We are alive. We are in these human bodies. Looks like, and everything has a cost. We are in a world of universe that is ruled by laws. And the law of causation, the law of karma is all around. So it's inevitable. As long as you don't wake up to your reality, not just centered in your body and mind, but centered everywhere, you will continue with this. It's called samsara.
So it's this God misidentifying as ego over and over again. Is there any object behind it, like a purpose?
Well, the purpose is to fulfill yourself. Because with your experience in the world is never enough. You are looking for something outside that you will never find it. That sense of completeness and full satisfaction, you will never find it outside. We are trapped here. So, learning the rules and the laws of these phenomena, accepting them, but at the same time, keep doing so that we can let that light come out, that light of knowledge and understanding. Spiritual life is all about nothing but the understanding of your reality. It's very Tao, you know. Are you satisfied?
I guess the answer is it's this way, so...
Yes, it's called statements of facts of life. In Sanskrit we call it Maya. It is what it is. Life and death, good and bad, this pair of opposites, can't help them. Take it or leave them. You cannot leave it either because you have to confront them.
Good enough, thanks.
Yes. We have one there, one here.
I guess, to his question, though, would you say the ego is self-protective, like what he's asking for the point of it, like why do we have it? You mentioned in the talk about survival, and that it's self-protective, but when our ego gets unchecked and our instincts to survive and to escape pain, whether it's the internal or external or whatever, that's when it becomes a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anyway.
Yes. We are in trouble basically because we act like kids. You know, we just don't stop to think. We just want to be treated like kids. And we can't afford that anymore. We are adults. We have to think for ourselves. It's not enough that you tell me, yes, you can have a God, just pray to God. No, you have to think about it. Does it make sense? What is God? Who is God? Why do I have to relate to a God? God is the highest thought I can think of. It's not just my highest thought, it is your highest thought. We have common ground there. It's the most amazing thing that our minds can express. But words cannot describe that. We want that, we love that. Who doesn't want to be a superhero here? That's why they are so successful. These superhero movies. So, it's, I guess this is an opportunity to think about stuff that we never think about. And we are so used to this, being introduced to a religion or an idea of God without much thinking. Definitely, it gave us some guidance in our life. It helped us, practice values and also kept us in check. Because you just can't do whatever you want. We live in a society, we have to live in harmony. So, the thing is that when it comes to self-inquiry and trying to find answers, I don't know if it happens to you, but I had these questions, which are called fundamental questions of life. Huh? Like, why are we here? What is all this? That's a wake-up call, It's like, oh, okay, I need to find answers. Then you have a purpose. I'm going to find answers here. And when you find that the answers are within and you have to work with yourself, you are like, oh, that you cannot buy it, no matter how much money you may have. You have to do your own work within and manifest that. Then it gets a little harder, but there is no other way. It comes to me and to you and to all of us. So, do we have to relate and surrender to a God? The concept and idea of God is a wonderful idea. It's a wonderful helper. It's a wonderful means to connect to that abstract principle that we are already. We are so caught up in our own individuality that we cannot see beyond. So when we relate to God, we open our hearts. When we are grateful, when we surrender, we open our hearts and we change our minds, the state of our minds. And we feel good. Not just at that very moment, but during the day. If you act dharmically, if you behave. So I always remember somebody told me, well, if you do your spiritual practices in the morning and you still feel depressed or sad or you are afflicted during the day, that's not enough. You're not doing enough. Meaning you have to call upon yourself. You have to remind yourself. You have to find sources of inspiration that will connect you and make you be happy. And stay at least content. Content. Happiness has a cause. I am happy because things turned out the way I wanted them to be. Contentment is more like a state of mind. I'm just happy because life is good. That's what we want. That takes a little work. I'm sorry, there's no other way. But you need that I to make determinations, to make a decision, to make a commitment. So it's a necessary evil. Any other questions?
Swamiji, when you spoke of the three different pains or suffering that we experience, the internal, external, and God sent
Heavenly, yeah.
Would you not say that they are all Bhagwan's Leela? And so why do we separate them?
Well, you can say that, but you don't experience that in your daily life. You can accept that within you, but you will say, hey, the AC is not working, or my neighbor keeps playing this music so loud, I can't meditate. So you can also take the right attitude, definitely. By having the right attitude, say, well, okay, is there anything I can do? This is the right attitude. Well, you can call your neighbor. I don't know, they may call you, I don't know. He may not like it. Or just simply accept it, and there is nothing you can do. And just in acceptance, you will just move on. That's what happens when, rain happens. Well, you had plans, but guess what? You didn't expect the rain to be. So in acceptance, it's a kind of surrender. You accept that you are not in charge. And when you see this big picture, happening, you are like, yes, of course. What can I do? Even if I pray, It's not really up to me for these clouds to stay away from each other. You see? So that keep us humble. But definitely, I wanted to work on this just to clarify that this life is worth it, and there is so much we can do to stay connected. There are so many goals we can set up in our lives, not just personal goals, but also spiritual goals. Baby steps that would make your life more enjoyable. That's the way to live. Yeah, we say, no, you have to live in God, through God, and for God. All right, but you have to understand what God is to you and who you call God. And you have to open your heart to it. Then you'll be safe. Trust me, you'll be safe. Because if you read the Gita, that's what it's all about. Surrender, give me your mind, give me your intellect, period. I will take care of you. It's super easy for those who don't question things. If you are into the bhakti thing, and you relate to Bhagavan, and it's easier. That's what we are advised. In this, Sri Ramakrishna talks about it again and again, that in this, as long as we have this I idea, ego idea, that we have to use these spiritual tools. We have to use our emotional constitution. The yoga of love. Now, don't get excited. Yoga means you have a relationship with your God. And then you're supposed to see that God in everybody. In your husband, in your wife, in your friends, in your enemies. And stay away from them. And if you have to confront them nicely, respectfully, because you are also there. Whatever wants people to do to you, you have to give to others. It's an exercise. But I think we have to stay inspired all the time. So sadhana, spiritual practice, is important because, as I always say, you have to stay tranquil. You have to stay calm. Not just one moment in the day, not just in your morning meditation. Throughout the day, your goal is to stay calm. You might witness yourself to be a little anxious, or that's okay. Shh, calm down. What do? Do your spiritual practices. Breathing, meditation, repeat the name of God. Relate to that principle. Pray. Prayer is beautiful. That way, it's going to be easier. Okay? Well, thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate. Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, that outer world is Purna, full of divine consciousness. This inner world is also Purna, full of divine consciousness. From Purna comes Purna. From the fullness of divine consciousness, the world is manifested. Taking Purna from Purna, Purna indeed remains, because divine consciousness is non-dual and infinite. Om, peace, peace.